Welcome back to the GenX Experience. This is episode 48, and we're in a new month. We're in March. This is actually our anniversary month. It is 2 years since the podcast started in March of 2024, and this is our third season. It is so weird because I'm like, wait, are we 3 years, 2 years? No, we have three seasons starting in 2026, but we've been around for 2 years. So thank you for tuning in. And speaking of anniversaries, and let's talk about recognitions, because last year the Gen X Experience was ranked as one of the best podcasts for Gen X by AARP, and I am now a member of AARP. I did it. I pulled the plug, but also they have great discounts, and I love following them on TikTok. They do like little things with Gen X, millennials, boomers. It's really cool to see, and Gen Z, talking about our old stuff and seeing what we recognize and what we don't, what they know, what they don't, etc. But we have another recognition that happened, and it is from PodRanker. They picked us as number 10 of the top 15 podcasts for Gen X. And I'm truly honored. I will include the link to that in the show notes so you can check out the description, what they wrote. I'll read it to you a little bit. But also, if you want to check out some other Gen X podcasts, because we're out there, we're speaking up, we're not being ignored. But let me share you what they wrote, because the thing is, when I read it, I have to say, honestly, it made me so happy, but it also made me want to cry, because I was having a little bit of doubts about the format. I'm like, should I change it up? Should I not do this? And then I read this and I'm like, no, people are getting it. And I like that we were recognized for being different, and that's how I've always felt, a little different. And I wanted to do something different. So let me read you a little bit of what they wrote. Blythe Alpern's podcast takes a different route than most Gen X shows. Instead of focusing primarily on pop culture nostalgia, the Gen X Experience tackles what it actually means to be a Gen Xer right now, in midlife. Launched in March 2024, the show releases 2 episodes per month, each running about an hour, and covers topics like dating after divorce, ageism in the workplace, caring for aging parents while raising teenagers, and mental health challenges that Gen X grew up never discussing. That said, the 80s kid nostalgia still shows up. Episodes regularly circle back to how growing up in that era shaped the generation's approach to the issues they're facing today. And then it talks about our notable guests and topics that we covered. And I'll finish with the last sentences, because these are the ones that made me want to cry. The show fills an important gap. Plenty of podcasts will tell you about the best 80s movies, but very few address the real life stuff Gen Xers are dealing with right now. It's honest, practical, and occasionally vulnerable in a way that feels earned rather than performative. And I just love that so much. Thank you, PodRanker. That just fills my cup, fills me with joy. No sarcasm needed, because I wanted to create this in a different way. And it's nice to know that it feels honest and practical and vulnerable, because yes, sometimes I share things. Sometimes we get vulnerable, my guests and I, and we're going to keep doing it. So I'm happy that it's filling a gap for us, because no one prepares you for being an adult. I mean, and what I mean by that is nobody, like, we can never truly understand what it's like to be in your 20s and your 30s and et cetera, 40. Now we're like in our 40s, 50s, and early 60s. And even though our parents tried to warn us, because they did we listen? Of course we didn't, because we don't listen to authority. And also, when you're a teenager, especially, you're like, oh, what do my parents know? These people are the dumbest people on the planet. I know more. I would tell my mom all the time, I'm like, oh, mom, it's the 80s. Ugh, mom, it's the 90s. And then you get to that certain age where, like, okay, my parents were right. I don't know anything. And adulthood is not all it's cracked up to be. It is some BS nonsense. And why did I want to grow up? I ask myself that occasionally. Actually, no, I'm sorry. More on a regular basis. I feel like as you get in your like late 40s and early 50s, you're like, this is supposed to get easier. It's not. And I'm also realizing I don't know what the hell I'm doing, but then nobody else does. So there's that comfort. And then also, if you follow me mostly on TikTok, we are on Instagram as well at the Gen X Experience Pod. I will I will reference how like my body keeps betraying me. Like I keep being reminded that I'm older. I don't feel that way, like mentally, spiritually, but like physically. Sometimes I'm like, I'm sorry, what is happening here? I didn't, as I said recently on TikTok, I didn't give you permission to do this. Like things are falling apart without us wanting it to happen. And even when you're doing, all the things, getting enough protein, enough fiber, lifting weights, lifting heavy weights, doing, walking, getting that certain zone of cardio, whatever it is, like we're doing the things, and then things are still falling apart. You can't get up off the couch. Your neck hurts, your head hurts, and you're like, all I did was sleep. Like what? And what do you mean my knees hurt when I just did a ton of squats and deadlifts and all this stuff? And you're like, okay, that's right. I'm in my 50s. And I'm going to make the noise that my parents made when they got off the couch. Mostly my dad. He was very dramatic with his, movement. So anyway, but yeah, like midlife it's an interesting time. And I definitely want to talk about it and address it. And as we move on to our golden years, which is way down the line, I'm going to say, we'll cover that too. So speaking of, we're in March. What is the topic this month? There really isn't a topic. It's just chilling with me in this solo episode. And you guys seem to enjoy my solo chats. And then later this month, we will have our book club chat. You can listen to a preview of the book that we're reading. It's a GenX, true crime GenX memoir called Rocket Man by Brett Langley, a fellow Gen Xer. And it's basically kind of a homage to his dad, who was tragically taken from him in a very violent house invasion in 2008. And then how that kind of sparked his memories and made him really reflect on growing up as Gen X and the time he spent with his dad. And it's really interesting. Like the stories he tells, like, these are so detailed. How do you remember these so well? And it also just brings you back. You're like, oh, I remember that. Oh, I remember that. Oh, that's so interesting. And it's just like, like that's a Gen X guy. Yes. That music, whatever. It's really cool. And so I invite you to pick it up on Amazon. You can listen to the bonus episode we recorded last month, and you can hear our full chat coming later this month. If you have read the book and you have any questions that you'd like to ask, please feel free to DM me or email me. My email is listed always in the show notes. That doesn't mean I want you to pitch me helping with my podcast. If you want to pitch me topics or things that you are working on that you'd like to share, please do. But I do not need help with the podcast at this moment. Someday I will. Yes, but not right now. Anyway, so what are we going to talk about in this solo episode that we're almost 10 minutes in? We're going to talk about just observations that I've been having lately. One of them is a personal one, because this past weekend, I was staying with my niece and nephew because unfortunately my sister and brother-in-law had to go to a funeral. And so, I was like, yeah, I'll hang with them. And they are 12 and 14. And you know what? Like, I always wanted to be a mom, and I didn't get to do that. So I am not child-free by choice. I am child-free by circumstances. We'll talk about that. I think that's a topic I want to cover, because sometimes the child-free conversation makes my head feel like it's in flames, because not all of us who are child-free is by choice. And there's nothing wrong with making the choice to have kids or not have kids or whatever the reason is. But I think there needs to be space for everybody. So anyway, but I have to say, being an aunt, I'm an aunt of 3. My sister has a boy and a girl. My brother has a girl. And I love watching them grow up. And it is so amazing to see them change. I mean, these are little people that I change their diapers. I've been peed on. I've been thrown up on. I've been pooped on. I think I might have also been bled on. So yes, I am a full service aunt, but, and I've watched them, it's been a while because they're older now and they have a better social life than I do. But, it's so interesting how the conversations change from when they're little, things that you talk about, and, they want your attention all the time, and you're playing games with them, and their little laughs and things they're discovering. And then they're asking you questions and you're trying to figure out, I'm like, how do I answer this for a 5-year-old? But now that they're older, we have different conversations. We chat about things we're into. My nephew's really into sports. We're talking about sports. We're talking about movies. My niece and I did her nails. I'm trying to show her how to, like, do your nail polish. This is the way, base coat, polish, couple layers, and, you know, fast drying top coat, and how to, like, make sure the whole thing, very girly. But for me, doing my nails is like something I find relaxing. So it's just, bonding over that, and just, they went to parties and sleepovers, because I'm not the end, like, you have to spend all your time with me. I wanted them to still have their life, but it was so nice to spend time with them. Buster and I went. Buster did not sleep with me either night that I was there, because my niece and nephew love him. I mean, he's the sweetest boy. So anyway, I was just thinking about how fortunate I am to get to watch them grow up and be part of their lives. And then I get to go home and chill. So I kind of feel like I get the best of both worlds. And I do. I love being an aunt, and I always will. And it's just, it makes me so happy. Like, it really does. And sometimes it makes me a little sad, because, my parents aren't here to watch them grow up, but they're watching. And so, and we still talk about my parents. So, yeah. Anyways, so moving on to another topic. So we've covered my joys of being an aunt, the book club update. Let's talk about something I've noticed. And I don't know if you've noticed this as well, but our music is everywhere. Like, if you watch the Super Bowl, I mean, the ads, they weren't great, but I was like, wait, that's our music. That's our music. That's our music. I watched recently, I was at my sister and brother-in-law's, and it was like, we were watching TV, and there was an ad that came on for a pharmaceutical. I think it was for something with stomach issues. And they were using Ace of Base. I saw the signs. And the three of us were like, oh my God, is that Ace of Base? Yes. Interesting choice. And I'm like, well, I saw the signs. So you saw the signs of the condition. They're like, oh, because, I'm in advertising. So, like, I analyze things, but it's just, I think it kind of, like, killed us a bit, or, like, just gave us that feeling like we have become the people where our music is now in commercials, where, like, when we were growing up, it was, it was, sometimes it was new stuff, but a lot of times you would hear, older stuff. Like, remember the California Raisins? The song they were using was, like, our parents' music. So, because obviously the people doing the commercials then were, boomers and Silent Gem. So, and now I saw someone, because Pepsi is bringing back, or trying to bring back, the Cola Wars. I thought that was great for the nostalgia. But someone online was like, this has to be Gen Z. And I wanted to be like, really? Because Gen Z probably doesn't know about the Cola Wars, because when I see discussions about advertising from Gen Z, they don't know things of a history of advertising. And they think things like pop-ups and events and whatever is, like, brand new. And I'm like, that's been done forever. Like, which scares me that they're not teaching the history. But I'm like, it could have been a team of Gen X, millennials, Gen Z, whatever. But, like, let's not assume that because it's a cool ad, it can't possibly be done by creatives who were around when the Cola War, like, we were children when the Cola War started, because that ad just felt very nostalgic. And I think the director, oh God, what is his name? He's done movies and he's also acted, is also Gen X. So he was, like, really excited about that. What do you think that is? So, yeah, I'm sorry for the Gen X snark toward Gen Z. Look, I've been thinking a lot about, you see conversations like Gen Zers are getting fired at a very high rate from work, because they don't know what they're doing. They don't know how to behave in a corporate environment. They don't want to do what you have to do. And look, I applaud them for wanting to change things. We all know that the corporate work-life balance is not existent. We are not treated well. We are expected to go above and beyond for literally nothing. We have toxic bosses. We have toxic coworkers. We are fed a bunch of crap. And, as Gen Xers, like, we tried to push back, but eventually you kind of just, like, this is what it is. I'm going to try to change what I can, or I'm just going to get through the day. Like, my motivation is to get money for retirement at 401k and to be able to pay my bills. And, if you ask a lot of people our age, like, are you happy in your job? Most people are going to say no. And we all know why. But at the same time, like, Gen Z doesn't seem to get that you kind of do have to pay your dues. And if you want to change things, you have to do it the right way and slowly. And they're not willing to do that. They don't get that you have to show up on time for work. Yes, we all know sometimes you can be late, sometimes it's out of your control, traffic, subway issues. They don't realize that you don't take personal calls all the time, or you least do it in a way that's sneaky, right? You text or whatever. We used to use AIM. So I remember my sister and I would talk on AIM at work, and nobody would know because we're still on our computer. So like, be smart about it. They don't know how to dress. They don't know how to speak. Actually saw like an AARP video that was the girls like, I hate email. Okay, we all hate email, but it's part of work, and that's how you communicate. And if you're not going to do that, then things aren't going to get done. If you have deadlines, you need to keep them. If you're struggling, you need to say something. And you know, I just think we're not teaching these kids like how to respect authority, like how to function in an adult world. So I do think it is part of the older generation's problems, but I also think Gen Z is unwilling, some of them, I'm not going to say every one of them, to adapt and then figure out a way to ask for help, to put an initiative, to try to make changes. They just don't want to do it. And bosses are sick and tired of it. And just, but at the same time, if you're seeing that Gen Z is struggling in your company, there have been companies that are bringing people in to teach them like corporate etiquette and to help them. And so if you're hiring Gen Z and you're noticing they're struggling, then maybe you need to take a step back and think about how we can help them, because this is the future of our country and our world. And if we don't help the younger generations adapt to the corporate world and then also allow them to make changes, we're going to have a huge problem. And I think we also need to realize that we are failing the younger generations by everything being online. Like, I know like my nieces and nephew, like they don't have books at school. Like everything's on the computer. I'm like that. And there are studies that say that's not the best way to learn. And as a Gen Xer, like I definitely feel that I still write things down, because if I'm just typing them, I don't really remember them. And like, I mean, yes, we came from a different time, but it's also interesting because I see, yes, we all know social media is social media, but I see some Gen Zers talk about, Gen X in the workplace. And a lot of times they get it wrong, because I'm like, do you actually know how old we are? Because sometimes they act like are old people, and we are in our mid to late 40s, 50s. And now the oldest of us will be 60, 61 this year. I saw some video. The girl was like, Gen X doesn't want to adapt to the technology. And I'm like, that's all we've ever done is adapt. We have had to adapt and adapt and adapt. From not having the internet to having dial-up. We had to learn fax machines and copy machines to sending things over email. Like we've had to adapt with social media and Slack. And like we have always had to adapt. And yes, maybe we're a little tired of it, but saying that we don't want to is kind of nonsense. I'm sure there are some of us that don't, but the majority of us know that you have no choice to do that. But I've also seen people who are like, well, I don't, why does my camera have to be on during a meeting? And why should I be taking notes? I have AI. Now, look, I think the AI note takers are great. I use them because when I'm on calls, whether it's networking or talking to clients, like I want to be present. And so sometimes I'm not taking all the notes, and then I have that transcript. Also, I have it if like someone says, I didn't say that, I'd be like, yes, you did. But at the same time, like you need to make sure you're allowed to do that in your corporate world, because businesses have guidelines and a handbook. And if you're violating company policy because you're too lazy to take notes, and you're not paying attention to the meetings, you're like, oh, that can take notes. No, that you're not going to get it. Like you need to be paying attention and then having that as a backup, but make sure you're allowed to do it. Because the girl's like, I don't get why Gen X. And I'm like, well, because we know that we're not going to remember things, and that should be our backup, not our only thing. So shortcuts are great, but you better do the work first. Like, it just bothers me. Speaking of that, things that bother me as a Gen Xer, is when I see Gen Z talk about us, and I'm like, do you know our age? Because they literally, like I said before, they talk about us like we are 70 years old. They're like, they'll make comments about us, and I'm like, that's not our generation. Like that we don't like humor. I'm like, we are the kings and queens of sarcasm and humor, and look at the comedians we grew up with, that we don't talk with our hands. We talk with our hands all the time. That we don't like when people say, I'm joking. Well, it depends upon how you're using it. Because if you're being a butthead and you're like, oh, I'm joking, and you said something obnoxious, no, we're not going to like it. But like, I'm joking, that's where sarcasm comes in. Oh, and then this person was surprised we were in social media. Again, how old do you think we are? Also, when my parents were around, my mother was on social media. So like my dad didn't care, but he was busy doing other stuff, nerding out on orthodontic stuff and technology to help him do stuff for orthodontics. But like we are there. Why wouldn't we be there? We were there when it started, like Friendster and what's the other one I'm thinking of? MySpace. Like we remember those things. Maybe we weren't like the first to adapt, and definitely millennials did, but like we remember like Facebook and when you had to, like, getting a Gmail account was like a big deal. And we used AOL, AOL's instant messenger. We used chat rooms. Like I think the problem is that they don't know who we are, and maybe their parents are Gen X and their parents kind of suck. I don't know. But like it just seems like they say these things with doing zero investigation. And like, what is wrong with you? And I'm not saying Gen X is perfect. We are not. There are some of us that I'd be like, can we kick them out of our generation? Or they represent us. I'm like, that is not how we all are. And of course, because we're not a monolith, no generation is. We're 15 years. I've said this multiple times. We are 15 years, like most generations. So people born in the 60s are not going to be the same as people born in the mid 70s and the late 70s. Like we will have a lot of things in common culturally and the way our parents were, because we were raised by silent Gen and boomer parents. Yes, Gen X was raised by silent Gen too. Like again, assumptions being made. I saw something the other day that was like saying the millennials are raised Gen Z or Gen X. And I was like, no. Oh yeah, like Gen X raised Gen Z, so it's our fault. And millennials are raising Gen Alpha. And I'm like, well, my nieces and nephew are Gen Alpha, and my brother and brother-in-law are Gen X. So no, like, it's just like when people think that Gen X was only raised by boomers. It's like, can we stop making sweeping generalizations? Because like, the assumptions makes an ass out of you and me. So I think the general assumptions, one, show that you're just showing your own experience and you're not looking anything up. Google is free, people. Google is free. Yes, we also have AI. You can ask it questions. You can ask Siri questions. You can ask Alexa questions. But still double check. I know we don't do that, but just sometimes when I'm online, I'm like, oh dear God, y'all are embarrassing. And that goes for every generation. But I will say, I do think that, again, the older generations, which we are one of, need to do a better job of making sure that Gen Z and Gen Alpha are prepared to go into the world as best you can, and that they realize that being an adult sucks, the big one. And, we have to work. And yes, they're going into a very hard job market. I mean, they're acting like it's the hardest job market of all time. And let's be clear. We had the Great Depression. We had the housing crisis. We had the dot-com bubble burst. We've had recessions, inflation, et cetera. We've had job markets change. I think that's also the thing when you think you're the only person that's been through it and you go, oh, other generations don't understand. That's a sweeping generalization. That's not true. We remember things. I have seen people ask questions like, hey, you went through the dot-com bubble burst or the housing crisis and then affected the job market. Like, what was that like? And I saw a girl last night. She's like 25 and she's having like the quarter life crisis. And she was freaking out. And I felt for her. So I'm like, yeah, we've all been there when we were in our mid-20s where you're like, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know if I'm doing this right. What if I'm bad at this? Like, you just start to question everything, because I think when you get to be about like 25, it's like you're out of college, you are in your adult life, and you're starting to realize, like, I have no clue what I'm doing. I feel like I should. Maybe you see people around you your age who are getting married or doing this, and you just feel like you're floundering, and that is totally natural. And the comments underneath were so kind. Like, people were like, yep, that's what happens in your 20s. You're going to be fine. we've all been there. And I was like, that's when my faith in humanity is restored, when we're like, times are hard. And being in your 20s, yes, have as much fun as you can. Use that decade as experimentation to figure out what you want and what you're doing, but also realize you're going to come to a point where, like, I don't know what the hell I'm doing. Am I supposed to? No, you're not. No. Nobody really ever figures it all out. And I think when you realize that, you're like, oh, okay, being a human is not easy. And as the world changes and evolves, it is hard. Yes, it's hard to buy a home. Yes, it's hard to save for retirement. Yes, the job market right now is crazy. Yes, the economy in the world and everything feels very unstable. This is not the first time this has happened. And um, I do think probably, a lot of us feel helpless and we don't feel hopeful, but we have gone through rough times, world wars, et cetera, that have, the Great Depression. Okay. Like, things have changed and evolved. And there have been times in history where, we've all felt like is this all there is? Are things going to get better? Are things going to get worse? So I think as older generations too, be understanding of what people are facing. And it's okay to say to them, like, hey, this is not the worst that have been. Like, yes, you feel this, but other generations have felt this. Maybe ask them. And we're trying to understand, we're trying to remember, but don't assume that your life is the worst. That's like when, our parents or grandparents would be like, oh, I had it worse than you. I had to walk uphill in the snow to school both ways. And you'd be like, yeah, you can't walk uphill both ways. And you grew up in Florida, it didn't snow there. So, it's just hard. And the thing is too, as you get older, you do start to forget sometimes what it's like to be a teenager or in your 20s or 30s or whatever. And sometimes when you start talking to people that age, you're like, oh God, yes, I remember that. And you're like, yeah, that's how it was. Or no, you see how things are different. And I just think we need to show each other some empathy. And some understanding. And that goes both ways, because I do get tired of the younger generations assuming that they're the only people that have gone through this, and they start blaming. I see a lot of, blame of the boomers, and then they start now with Gen X. And I'm like, what is that helping? Like, yes, every generation before you screws things up and then you have to fix it and then whatever. And they do the best they can because things happen. But if you keep blaming everybody else for the problems that you're not willing to work on or fix, or like work with these people to work on or fix, nothing changes. The blame game accomplishes absolutely nothing. So, I'd like to see that change. I think one of these days, I don't know if it's going to happen this year because I've kind of laid out what I'm going to be talking about, which could change. I mean, we're only in March. I would like to sit down with like Gen X, or sorry, Gen Z. Gen Alpha's, I think, might be till a little too young, and just like talk to them about what it's like, do some comparison, talk to what we were like, and ask them what they do and do not understand about Gen X, because I think sometimes I'm like, that is not what happened. That is not how we are. And making generalizations about an entire generation up or down is not helpful. So, because believe me, there are people that I grew up with where I'm like, oh, yeah, you're not who I thought you were. Delete and block. And it makes me kind of sad too. But we all evolve and change, some for the better, some for the shitty. Speaking of future topics that we will be covering, so we will again in the fall be talking about perimenopause and menopause. I'm going to keep that always in October. I want to add for November, we're going to talk about what they call Movember. We're going to talk about men's health. So that'll be like prostate health, because men's hormones, things men's face, because this podcast is not just for women. This podcast is for everyone. So we are going to keep making it that way. We will have more book club picks as well. What else are we talking about? Like I said, next month we'll talk about Gen X being, CEOs or not. We will talk about, I thought we'd be fun to look back at, 1986 and like the movies, because I've seen a lot of the movies from that time seem to be coming back into theater. There's a craving for nostalgia and of a simpler time. Like, I don't know if it's age related or just the way the world feels, but when we all of us love talking about our music from the past and the movies and the TV shows and even commercials and just the way life was. And was it perfect? Of course, it was not perfect. I mean, the 70s were not perfect. Like when I was about to be born, we had the Watergate crisis going on. There was a recession. There was a gas shortage. Like in the 80s, we had the AIDS crisis. Like, in the 90s, there was a Gulf War. Like things happened. It wasn't perfect by any means. But when we talk about going back to the 80s or 90s or 70s, we want the cultural stuff. We want to be kids again, where life just felt simpler. I mean, I always see posts where it's like, if you could go back to the 80s any year, like what was the first thing you do? And I'm like, for me, it'd be like, go hug my parents. Like, I don't care. I would love to wake up on a Sunday morning in my house when I was a kid, where we would stay in our pajamas all day. I would love to sit around the family dinner like we had every night and, have my mom's meatloaf and mashed potatoes or lasagna or whatever, and just talk about our days and just be with my mom and dad because, yeah, I still miss them every day. And, it's been 5 years and or 6 years and yeah, it's gonna be 6 years and 9 years this April and July, and it still sucks. It still sucks. I wish I could share this podcast with them and like the recognition that's received. Like, one day I want to win like a big podcast. I want something. I do. I don't care. I'm gonna just put it out there in the universe. I want the recognition. Like, I do. I'm not doing this for that, but like it would just be so cool to have that happen. So anyway, what else are we talking about this year? We are talking about, yeah, let me go look. Okay. We're going to talk about the midlife slump, like when you kind of just get to a point where you're just like tired and exhausted and what that feels like, why making friends as an adult is so hard. Um, we're going to talk about, yeah, we'll just talk about a variety of things. We might talk about over 50, influencers as well. I'm not sure. I'm thinking about that. Um, anyway, those are just some of the topics. If there's anything that you would like me to cover, let me know. You can, again, always email me and just say, podcast topics. If there's someone you think I should talk to, let me know. If you have a book suggestion for the book club, let me know. I think the next one, our summer book club, I think we'll do something silly and fun. Maybe we'll do a choose your own adventure. We'll talk about that. I don't know. Maybe I saw like books from our youth, like, I don't know, Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret, Mr. Henshaw, um, The Mouse and the Motorcycle. Like maybe we'll do something younger. I don't know. Let me know. Let me know your thoughts. So just, yeah, just trying to think of things. The brain is always flowing. So, but of course, I want your input. What else? Oh, speaking of nostalgia, is anybody watching Love Story? I tried. If you like it, totally fine. Not everyone is entitled to their own opinion. I tried. First, I wasn't going to watch it at all because I'm like not a huge Ryan Murphy fan. I tried to watch his show. I think he did about Truman Capote, and it was so boring and awful. And the guy playing Truman Capote, I'm like, can we stop cosplaying as people? It was not good. So I wasn't interested in watching The Love Story, which is about John F. Kennedy Jr. and Carolyn Bassett's love story. But people were like, oh no, it's good. And I still have my George magazines I have the final edition and then the first 2 years. I don't know why I stopped getting, I think it's because I graduated and I was like in ad school and I'm like, yeah, it's just, and I was doing quarter-ray programs. It's just too hard. So, I mean, this is an iconic magazine that mixed culture and politics and talked to both sides. And it's cool because when I posted about it on TikTok, people were like, oh, I remember that. And you should keep them. And yeah, I have mine and I subscribed. And someone's like, this wouldn't work today. And I'm like, yeah, no, it wouldn't, which is really sad because we don't want to hear from each other. We don't seem to want to understand each other. But anyway, so I tried to watch 3 episodes. I forced myself to watch 3 episodes and I was like, I cannot do it because Naomi Watts played Jacqueline Kennedy Onassis. That was the worst portrayal I've ever seen. And the writing for the show is straight up garbage. I'm sorry. Um, I constantly was stopping it to go look things up because I'm like, this seems like nonsense. It's drama for the sake of drama. It feels very tabloidish. Can you tell I don't like it? The way Daryl Hannah was portrayed, because she dated JFK Jr., made her look pathetic, needy, it just insensitive. And it was just like, I mean, she got so pissed off that she wrote an opinion piece in the New York Times. I'll try to link it. It's worth reading. And one of the things that caught me by surprise was she's like, there's a podcast. A lot of shows do this, right? They have podcasts to go along with the show. But the producers were saying, everyone's rooting for JFK and Carolyn or JFK Jr. and Carolyn Bessette. And so we need to have an antagonist. And that's what, Daryl Hannah is. I'm like, no, this is real life you're talking about. This is not a fictionalized story that you just maybe were inspired by them. So you decided you have to like dramatize it and lie about someone. That is disgusting to me. I find that appalling and disgusting. What I also find gross is the people who like criticize Daryl Hannah. I'm like, you don't know what happened. She has the right to speak up and stand up for herself. The same with like Jack Schlossberg, who is JFK Jr.'s nephew, Carolyn Kennedy Schlossberg's son. He's pissed off. He's been very outspoken about a lot of things. He is running for office, I believe, in New York. Some people saying he's just capitalizing on his uncle and the Kennedy name. Well, this show just happens to come out when he's running, and he is a Kennedy. So why wouldn't he capitalize on that? I mean, the Kennedys are a political dynasty in this country. They're probably the closest thing maybe we had to, we had to royalty because, they called John F. Kennedy and Jacqueline Kennedy like Camelot because they were young, and it was a different time, and people were just like fascinated with them, rightly so. They were very interesting, characters and people, and just the tragedy of the assassination, and just like they were young and smart and fashionable and attractive. And so, yeah. And then because of that, because of the assassination, we became fascinated with John F. Kennedy Jr. because he was so young. And also, as he grew up, the man was stunning. He was super hot and an interesting person, charismatic and smart. I saw someone say, never seemed to have much confidence. I'm like, are you kidding me? Did you not watch any of his interviews? And watching a little bit of Love Story is like, God, I cannot imagine growing up under that much scrutiny and constantly having the paparazzi follow you around and constantly people wondering about what you're doing. Are you going to follow in your father's footsteps, etc.? Like, it's just, he didn't pass the bar a couple times. Like, I don't know how you live like that. And also grow up, under the spotlight in a famous family, and having lost your father in such a public, horrible way. Like, I can't imagine it. So I feel great empathy for him. At the same time, we all know that he shouldn't have gone up in that plane, and it's tragic and sad, but he's the reason they're not here. He just didn't have enough experience. The weather wasn't good. His instructor wasn't there. Not to mention, I just have to say as a side note, I don't care who you are. You could be John F. Kennedy Jr. I am never getting in one of those I hate those small planes. I'm claustrophobic. They make me nervous. I need a bigger plane and a window, because I was last year went to fly to Colorado, or no, not last year, the year before. And I always like to sit in the window seat. There was no window. And I was like, oh, we're going to have a panic attack because I am claustrophobic. Thankfully, the lady switched with me. And then on the way back, I switched my flight. But, airlines used to tell people anyway, there's no window, because some of us are claustrophobic. And I swear to God, as I've gotten older and perimenopausal, like, I feel like my anxiety and claustrophobia has gotten worse. So thank you. But anyways, back to the show. So, it's so dramatized. And I think there's a lot of people, of course, Gen Z, who wasn't around for this, don't remember it. I'm sure there's some millennials who don't remember because they were very young, who are like, what's going to happen? Again, Google is free. You can literally look up what happened to JFK Jr. and Carolyn Bessette. Also ask yourself, you know what? I don't see them anymore. I wonder what happened. The first episode gives you a little spoiler alert. Like, some people are saying there's going to be season 2. I don't really know why. Maybe they don't get that this is real life. There are people cosplaying as Carolyn Bessette. People are like, it's not that deep. But this is what drives me crazy too. Is like, there's so many other things going on in the world. It's not that deep. Okay, we're allowed to be annoyed by a lot of things or interested in a lot of things. We don't just have to focus on one thing. And I do kind of agree that people are more fascinated with what she wore, like the headbands, than and where she ate, where they went, than they are about who she was as a person. And I think, in my opinion, that's why people are getting pissed off, because it's like you're copying her. You're trying to, people are like, if she was around today, she'd be a clean girl. No, she wouldn't. She'd be into Pilates. No, she wouldn't. She'd be Haley Bieber. No, she wouldn't. You can't take someone that was like in their 30s, in the 90s, and assume what they would be now because of a different time. And you obviously are not paying attention. She chain smoked. Yes, she was very minimalist. Her hair was always messy. She was, one thing is like nice to see in the show. She knew who she was. She was very self-assured, but also the way she dressed was very like fashion girl of the 90s, working for Calvin Klein. And um, yeah, they're not getting it. They're not looking her up. And like, yes, being inspired by someone, wearing their clothes, fine. But there's a difference between being inspired and copying someone and having no interest in who they are and just wanting to pretend to be them. Like someone posted a picture of the line outside of Bubby's. Bubby's is like a very famous brunch place in New York. I've been there. There's always been a line. I waited like, I think it was like an hour and something with two of my friends because we're like, we had to go there, try it. I never went back. I was like, I can't wait in line all the time. And it was good, but it's an iconic place. They're also going to this store called C.O. Bigelow's that has been there forever. It's this very cool, like old style pharmacy, but it also has all kinds of gifts and hair stuff. It's like you're all in one, shop, which is what pharmacies kind of used to be like back in the day. Like they were soda shops and stuff too. And they've never heard of it. I'm like, what is wrong? Like you guys just don't, you're not actually looking up, why did she go to that store? Because it was iconic. Why did she dress the way? Like, who was she? Like, and trying to recreate her and reimagine her is just weird to me. And please, for the love of all that is holy, stop calling her CBK. You didn't know her. No one called her that. And you're being like, I just find it disrespectful. And maybe it's because I lived through that time. I don't know. But I will say this, and I'm going to wrap the show up because it's getting a little long. I love going back to the 90s in New York and just like watching that and reminiscing about that time and just thinking about like the way we dressed in the 90s. I feel like fashion was kind of all over the place. Like, like I remember going to clubs in college wearing bodysuits and jeans and wearing like flannels. So the way we dressed in high school is not the way we dress later. And like just the fashion was constantly evolving and changing. We had the grunge influence and punk and we had, like when I think of the 90s, I'm like, God, my fashion changed all the time. And like, the platform shoes and yes, headbands came in, came out, whatever. Like I'm never wearing them again. They were so uncomfortable. They gave you like massive headaches. But it is fun. And I will say that the one thing in the 3 episodes that I watched, and I'm not watching the rest of it because I'm sorry, I think it's straight up garbage. And the way people are being portrayed, with the exception of Carolyn Bessette, the actress playing her, are just doing a bad job. They're cosplaying. Is the music they chose, like hearing the 90s music, and they're really good at picking music that like fits the situation, which I do not think people who didn't live through that time would know that. But those of us who did, I'm like, oh, that's perfect for this. Yes, that's totally perfect for that. And also just remembering the music and yeah. And New York, like I was like, I went to New York a couple times in the 90s. I first went as a college tour. The School of Advertising at University of Florida went to advertising agencies, and that's what we did it for a spring break. And that's where I met some of my good friends and people that I still know today. I may not talk to them all the time, but whatever. We had the best time in New York in the 90s. Was such a cool space. We were there in 93. Yeah. And we went to different ad agencies and it was just amazing. And we walked around New York and we went shopping. I remember I bought myself a Coach purse, like a little saddle, I guess kind of saddle bag-ish. It was like $100. That was like the most I ever spent on a purse at that time. But I knew I wanted to buy myself something really cool in New York. I still have a mug that I got from Bloomingdale's. It was like a very specific thing. We had to get the little brown bag or the big brown bag. It was just fun going to the Village, going to clubs. I think we went to the Limelight. It it was just really fun going to shows. I saw Miss Saigon. We were at the Conan O'Brien show. My friend had a humongous crush on him. And I remember we were going to the show and President Clinton was in town, so the streets were blocked. And my friend was losing her shit. And she was like kind of yelling at a cop. And I'm like, oh my God, we're not going to make it to the show. We're going to get arrested. So I was like, oh, were the subway still open? She's like, yeah. So we went to the subway to get to the show because my friend, and she got to dance with Conan. And then later she entered into the page program at NBC. And funny enough, um, I didn't know she was going to be my roommate at the time. And I had gone to see the teacher that was taking us. I was like, hey, I'm not going to be at the orientation because I was going home to get my hair done and go shopping. And he happened to be talking to somebody who was like about the page program. And he didn't bother to tell my friend. And then my friend was like, was talking about, I'm like, oh my God, I was in his office. Dr. Morrison, I was like, I was in his office and he was talking to somebody. Somebody was like, knew that you were interested. I didn't know who the person was at the time. And so she, like, thankfully because of that, like she got to do the NBC page program. And I think I went with her to meet with the guy. Like we got to sit at Conan's desk. And then later, our flight on the way home, like there was some issue. I don't know, it was weather or whatever, or they overbooked. And so they asked for volunteers and a bunch of us like, yeah. So we got a free ticket. And they're like, we're taking you to the airport and then we'll take you home to Gainesville. I think they were flying us into Jacksonville. And so she used her ticket to go to New York. And I'm like, hey, I'm going to save my ticket to come visit you. And that's what I did. So I got to hang out in New York with her. And I got to hear all about the page program. And it was just such a unique and special time. And New York was just so interesting. Like you could ride the subway. Because when I went to New York with my parents when I was younger, like the subway, you could smell the subway from the stairs. So yeah, it was a unique time. And if you want to watch the show for that, fine. And if you're liking the show, like, again, like I said, totally fine. I think it's straight up crap. I also think it's weird when people are criticizing, the Kennedys or Jack Schlossberg, like telling him he doesn't remember things or whatever, like, or Daryl Hannah, like you weren't around in that time. Even if you were, these are people's real life. These are people's real family. These are people's real experiences. And we don't know what happened. And it's just obnoxious for us to think that they would, aren't going to be pissed about their betrayal. As I have to say, if my family was being, showed and I was never asked about it and I didn't really I wouldn't be happy either. Because you are bringing up a painful time. Like that accident was so tragic. I remember being in Chicago when it happened, being on the phone with friends, and we're all like, oh my God, are they going to find them? And then realizing like they're dead. They're dead. And then hearing when they did find them and they were still in their seats and like, because he had a broken foot at the time, and just being absolutely crushed. And I think they were going to a cousin's wedding. So just thinking about how that cousin felt, like their wedding is going to be associated with the death of 3 people. I mean, the Kennedy family, the curse, the tragedy that family constantly experiences is just really, really sad. And I just feel for especially Caroline Kennedy. I mean, she lost her dad, then her mom. Her mom died of cancer, but pretty young, because had she not smoked, she probably wouldn't have gotten cancer. And then her brother, and she just recently lost her daughter. I don't know how you survive that much tragedy. So I can't imagine what she's feeling now about that show. But anyway, it is fun to look back at the 90s. Such a unique decade. And I don't know about any other Gen Xers, but that decade feels kind of blurry for me because I started off being in high school, graduated in 92. And then I was in college from 92 to 96. Then I went to ad school. So I was in Miami, and then I was in Minneapolis, and then I went to Chicago to start my career. So I started as a teenager in my 20s, and it just feels like some things I don't remember, some things I remember very well. But I think that's the decade where I feel like I became an adult. Please, somebody should have told me to enjoy being a kid, stay in college for as long as possible. Anyway, not take life so seriously. So, but I love the music, and maybe one of these days I will bust out my CD collection. I still have it. I'm not getting rid of it. I have a little CD player I bought, and we'll go through, because I had very eclectic tastes. I loved everything from Air Supply to Depeche Mode. I have Enya. I have, Guns N' Roses. No, not Guns N' Roses. I don't think I was not a huge, I have Poison. I have Gregorian chants. I have electronic music. I got into a lot of alternative. And so, Napster CD birds and like all kinds of stuff. And I think it'd just be fun to like look back at that. So maybe we'll do that one of these solo episodes. Anyway, I've been talking for quite some time, so we're going to shut up. So anyway, thank you for coming along on this rambly journey of my solo episode. Hopefully you enjoyed it. And don't forget to pick up Rocket Man, our winter book club. Spring is almost here. In Atlanta, it feels like it's come early. It is available on Amazon. You can I'll include the information in the show notes. Don't forget to follow us on Instagram. Definitely I'm more active, and our community is larger on TikTok. Granted, sometimes I think about just getting rid of social media altogether, but come join us. And I'm doing way too many calls to action, which is not great for advertising, but we're just going to cram them all in. And please don't forget, if you like the show, to rate and review. It definitely helps for people finding it, whether you're listening to it on Spotify, YouTube, or Apple. And once again, thank you to Podranker for recognizing the podcast this year. And thank you to all of you for listening and coming along on this journey of 2 years as we're in our third season. And until next time, my fellow Gen Xers, don't you forget about me, because I will not forget about you.